Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back. Today what we're going to do is create an email capture portal. So if you have ever wanted to create an email newsletter or add some functionality to a website of yours or one you plan to create that includes how to capture emails, then this is one for you. So essentially what we're going to do is use the Vue.js JavaScript single page application framework and Firebase, which is a backend as a service provider, to quickly create this. So in order to do this, the first thing we need to do is actually install the Vue CLI. So if you guys haven't yet, we're going to go ahead and open up a terminal and run the command npm i-g at vue/CLI. And what this is going to do is download that Vue CLI for us. Once this is downloaded, what we can do is go ahead and create Vue projects. The Vue CLI is going to generate the entire project directory for us, including the package.json for metadata about the project, package lock-json for any kind of our packages that we're going to be using, or external sheets of JavaScript code that are going to accelerate our own development. And then we have a few other folders such as source for all of our source code and public for any kind of public assets that we're going to be using on our Vue application. So once this is downloaded here, we're going to go ahead and start off with the Vue create command, and that will get started. So I actually already have this downloaded, so once yours is completed, you can get started as well. So if you hadn't, we can go ahead and click CD to move back to my home directory, and then I can move on to the desktop with CD desktop. I'm going to run the command mkdir view, or we're going to call it view-firebase newsletter. And then we're going to change directories into that. And I'm going to run the command view create view-firebase newsletter. And then this is going to go ahead and create this project for me in this directory. So while this is going ahead and working, what we're going to go ahead and do is create our Firebase project. So what we can do is go to firebase.google.com and then click go to console up in the top right. Then we can click add project and put in view-firebase newsletter. You may have to use a different slug to have a unique project name. Once we do that, we can go ahead and create our project. Once our project is created, we're going to be able to create a Firestore database, which is a document data store, which we're going to store both email address and first name as individual documents in our document data store. So let's go ahead and do that now. We can go to database. Once we click on database, we can then go ahead and click on create database. We want to start in test mode so we can have public access. And then we're going to go ahead and choose our Firestore location as US Central, or choose the location that is closest to you, depending on where you're located in the world. So once this is created, we're going to go ahead and then add in the additional features that we need, which in this case are a collection of documents, and in this case the collection is going to be called email addresses. So now let's flip back to our terminal and finish creating our Vue project. We want the default with Babel and ESLint, which is going to create the ESLint file for ensuring syntactic consistency across our code base, and then Babel as well as our precompiler before we deploy to the web. All right, so while that's hurrying up here, we'll flip back, take a look. We're still provisioning our Cloud Firestore as well. So we're just going to wait on both of these here. After these are created, we're going to go ahead and again create that database, and then we're going to create the view, which is going to allow us to enter in our email address and first name, and which will then post to our backend Firestore database, which we are creating. So there we go. So we went ahead and finished up here. We've got a few more installs to do. Flip back, we're creating security rules, so our Firestore database has been created. All right, so now we want to go ahead and go to Start Collection, where we click that and give it a collection ID. So we're going to call it email addresses with a capital E and a capital A in addresses. Then we're going to create our initial document. You can go ahead and click Auto ID, and it'll generate a document ID for us. Then we can just go ahead and click Save. After that, our collection will be created, and the first document will have been added. Now that we have that, we can go ahead and we can add our application. So let's go ahead and do that now. So I click the Firebase icon up on the top here. I'm going to click back into my Vue Firebase newsletter project, and then I'm going to click on web here below. So if you guys didn't see that, you see where these HTML tags are here. We want to click that so we can add our Vue web project. So we're going to call this Vue Firebase newsletter. And then we also want to check the box for set up Firebase hosting for this app, and then view Firebase newsletter. We're going to register the app and then go through the initial steps. All right, so now that our Vue project is done, we'll flip back to that, and we can go ahead and take a look at it. If we run npm run serve, that'll go ahead and open that up for us, and it looks like no package.json. So let's take a look here. We need to change into that directory first, so cd view Firebase newsletter, then npm run serve. All right, so this is going to spin up the development server for us and build our project. So once that's taken care of, we can go to localhost at port 8080. And there we go. So here's the initial boilerplate code for our Vue application. So now we're going to go ahead and close out that dev server, and I'm going to go ahead and look at, or actually we'll restart the dev server because we're actually going to need that to run while we're doing our edits. Then we're going to click Command T to open up a new tab in our shell. You may need to open up another terminal depending on whether you're using Mac, Windows, or Linux. Next, we're going to go ahead and move into our source folder, so cd source and ls. We see we have app.vue, assets, an assets folder, a components folder, and then a main.js file. So again, our main.js file basically takes our app.vue component and then renders that on the screen, mounting it on the HTML DOM element that has the ID of app. Okay, so let's take a look next at our app.vue element. So this goes ahead and it has an initial template. We see here, so we have a template, and this template basically says, it renders the Vue logo, and then it renders a hello world component. And we see in the script tag that it imports a hello world component. So I'm going to go ahead and use vim app.vue to take a better look. So there we go. So we see we have our template. Again, Vue is basically composed of a template, a script, and a style, so a single Vue component. And again, a template is basically a place where we can interpolate HTML and JavaScript, so we can basically render the view however we want it to look. And then we have the script tag, where we basically define the state for the component or any kind of fields or variables or attributes that we're going to need to render in the HTML template. In addition, we can define methods for our functionality that the Vue is going to use. Finally, we have style tags for CSS styling, and we can go ahead and actually add the scoped attribute if we want, and that'll go ahead and that'll go ahead. Oops, one sec, guys. There we go. And that'll go ahead and scope this style to the specific component as well. Just a neat trick. But all right, so we go ahead and we want to import and create a new component. So we want to get rid of this import hello world, import email portal from /components email portal. All right, and now we can go ahead and get rid of this hello world here and put 34 email portal here. And then we can get rid of hello world up here and put email portal there as well. Okay, so now that we've got that, we can go ahead and write and quit, so :wq, clear, and then we're going to go ahead and cd into the components file. We're going to go ahead and rm hello world.vue to remove that component, and then we're going to create a component called email portal.vue. So I'm typing vim email portal.vue, at which point I'm going to create my template tags. And then I'm going to create my input field tags. And type is going to be text. And then I'm going to put a button. And remember, this button is for submitting my email address and name. And then these input fields are for my email address and name. We'll add a placeholder of first name and a placeholder of email address. All right, so now we need to add our script to add our functionality to send the email address and first name to our backend Firestore. So let's go ahead and set up the DB. So we need a variable called database, and this needs to be our connection to the database Firestore. So let's go ahead and create this connection now. Now, in order to do that, we need to get some initial configuration. So let's do this here. So let's go ahead and go to our View Firebase newsletter, back to what we're doing here, and we see register app, add Firebase SDK. We can skip past that. We already added the Firebase CLI earlier. Or no, actually we only added the Vue CLI. So if you haven't yet, go ahead and run this command, npm i-g firebase-tools. And once you do that, we're going to go ahead and run these next commands as well to initialize our Firebase project. So let's go ahead and continue to console. And then we're going to go ahead here to View Firebase Newsletter. Under that, where we see View Firebase Newsletter, we're going to click the wheel. And then we can go down here, scroll all the way down to where we see config. And we're going to go ahead and copy this object that we see right here. Now that we have that, we're going to move back a directory into let's see, pwd. We're in our source directory. So now we want to create a folder or a file in our source directory called Firebase Config.js. And in here, we're just going to go ahead and say export default, and then we're going to paste that object in there. And I'm going to go ahead and ensure that our spacing is correct just by doing that. And there we go. So I basically put a tab between each one. Sometimes with Vim, with tabs and spaces, we'll get confused. So we can put export default there. Now we can create a file called Firestore init.js. And in here, we're going to say import Firebase from Firebase. And then we're going to go ahead and import our config. So we're going to say import config, or we're going to say import Firebase config from /Firebase config. And then we're going to say const, we're going to initialize our application here. So in order to do this, we're going to say const Firebase app equals Firebase dot initialize app Firebase, passing Firebase config as the parameter. Then we're going to go ahead and say export default Firebase app.firestore. All right, so now we're importing Firebase from the Firebase Npm package. So we're going to go ahead and run :! If you're in Vim, and then run npm i-save Firebase. And then that'll go ahead and install Firebase for us as the npm package. All right, so once this is installed here, we're going to be able to test this out to see if we can actually make a connection here. And if we can, we'll be able to successfully post the email. So import Firebase from Firebase, import Firebase config from Firebase config. Firebase config equals Firebase.initialize app, passing Firebase config, and then exporting Firebase app.firestore so we can access our database. So let's go ahead here. And now we have our Firebase configuration for our web application for our project. Then we have our Firestore init, or our Firebase configuration, our Firestore initialization for our database. And then we're going to go back into our components here and Vim back into our email portal, at which point we can then say, we can then get our database. So we're going to say import db from Firestore init. And then we're going to go ahead and say this. We're going to say db, we need some methods here. So we're going to say this. We're going to say export default. And here we're going to have data. So in Vue, this is how you have state for a single view. So what we have here is a single component, right? A single template. So you can think of template as almost interchangeable for component. So we have a single component, and we have some input fields. And we want these input fields to be bound to a field in our in state. And all state is a persistent, which means continuing to exist, way to store data. All right, and for components. So in this case, we always say data. This is almost like a keyword in Vue, data, and we have a : pass, and then we have a function. So function, and then we go ahead and we return. We're going to return an object, actually. And this object is going to be the fields that we want. So in this case, we have first name and email address. And we're just going to go ahead and initialize them with empty strings, and then go up to the top here, and using a directive, which is basically a unique attribute to Vue, we're going to say v. So we're going to say v model equals first name. And then vModel equals email address. So what this is going to do is bind these inputs. So anytime that I type in one of these inputs, it's going to go ahead and bind that output to my email, to first name or email address in these fields here. So then when I go ahead and below and add a comma and then methods, I can go ahead and define methods that can use that data. In this case, I want to send that first name and email address to my backend collection. So I'm going to create a method called submit, and it's going to be a function. And this one is going to go ahead and take the username and password and submit it to the backend. So we're going to say db.collections. And remember, we created our collection called email addresses, and we're going to say dot add, passing an object, and that object is going to be the first name and email address. So what we're going to do is this. We're going to say we're going to add first name. It's going to be self.first or this.first name. And email address is going to be this.email address. Okay, so now we have a submit function. We have a way to store state. We have input fields. This is the way to store state. We have input fields that are bound to our way to store state, and then we have a submit button. And we actually want the submit button to call our submit function. So we're going to say v on click equals submit as a string. All right, so there we go. And oops, v on click equals submit. Okay, so now that we have that, what we can do is go ahead and close this out and try running this and see how well it does here. All right, so we have our dev server running over here. Let's see, we have an unknown word in app. This is in our style in our main, in our app.view. So let's go ahead and change that. We actually don't even need any style in here. We can just get rid of that tag altogether. Right, and quit that. We'll switch back to our dev server. We'll see input is getting component template should contain exactly one root element. All right, so we need to go ahead and adjust that. So we'll move into components and Vim email portal. We need exactly one root element, so we'll add a div, and then we're just going to move all the others into a nested, so that they're nested within a div. All right, and now we can go ahead and take a look back at our dev server. All right, so now we're successfully running on port 8080. So we'll go ahead and refresh this. Go ahead and inspect. Console looks clean. Now we can go John and John at test.com and submit. We got some errors. Error in v-on handler. Collections is not a function. So it should be just collection, not collections. So let's see, move into components, open up email portal. We're going to go move to DB collections. And we're going to change that to db.collection. Right and quit. Head back to our dev server. Looks clean. Reload. We're going to name email address, submit, no errors. Check our database. There it is. And we have a second document. And our second document contains the name and email address. So the submit is working to the back end. So now what we want to do is go ahead and deploy this application. So now if you guys haven't yet, go ahead and run the command npm i-g firebase-tools. All right, and that'll install them for you. Then you can run the command firebase init. But first we want to make sure that we're in the directory that we want to be in. So we're gonna cd up two directories, and I want to be in View Firebase Newsletter / View Firebase Newsletter. So I'm in users, my username /desktop / View Firebase Newsletter / View Firebase Newsletter. So now that I'm in this folder, I'm going to run the command Firebase init. And this is going to go ahead and initialize some configuration files that I need. So I'm going to need Firestore. So I'm going to press, it says which Firebase CLI features do you want to set up for this folder? Press space to select features, then enter to confirm your choices. So I want Firestore, and I also want hosting. Then I'm going to go ahead and click enter. And then I'm going to click, it says, first, let's associate this project directory with a Firebase project. You can create multiple project aliases by running Firebase use, but for now, we'll just set up a default project. So we're going to select an existing project, and then we're going to go ahead and select the project that we created. So that's going to be View Firebase Newsletter, or whatever you set up as the initial project. So now we have Firebase rules. So we can go ahead and create a file. It's asking us which one we want to create for this, and in this case, it's going to default to firestore.rules. So we're going to let it default to that, and then we're going to go ahead and say we're going to use firestore.indexes.json for Firestore indexes. And again, all these are basically security rules for the data. So we wanted to find who has access to our backend database, and then we also wanted a way to query our database in a way that is more optimal when we are trying to query for large sets of results as we scale up and store more data. So we can do both of those things with these files here. Finally, we're going to use /dist as our public directory, and then configure as a single page app. So when we run the command npm run build, what's going to happen is our Vue.js app is going to go ahead and build, and it's going to output a dist folder. And this dist folder is what we want to go ahead and deploy to Firebase for hosting our application, right? And then once we deploy that dist folder, we'll be able to publicly see our newsletter capture portal online. So there we go. We have our dist folder created. So now we can go ahead and take a look when we see cat firebase.json. We can see hosting, and then public is at /dist. So that's good. And now we can go ahead and say Firestore serve. Firebase serve. And that'll go ahead and serve up that dist directory for us. So let's take a look to ensure that's correct on localhost 5000. All right, so that looks good. And now we can run the command Firebase Deploy. And it will deploy it publicly for us on the internet, at which point I can go and see it via a URL. Okay, so now we see we have successfully deployed our application publicly. So now we have a hosting URL, and if we navigate to that hosting URL, then we'll be able to see our email portal publicly deployed on the internet. So this newsletter, we'll try public demo as the name and demo@name.com. Submit, and we can go ahead, and here we see our latest document, demo@name.com, and public demo. So there we go, guys. That's how to do it. We built a basic newsletter capture portal using Firebase backend as a service and Vue.js SPA framework to capture our newsletters. I appreciate you guys watching very much. Any comments or questions, please leave them below. I will get right back to you. And thanks again. Be sure to comment, subscribe, thumbs up, and all that fun stuff. Have a great one, guys.